Hi, David. How are you?
Hello, Brandon. I'm very well. Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
I'm really excited to have you at CMC this year. I'm really interested to learn a bit about how you got started in the world of children's. But first, sort of how you kind of found your interest point in the world of children's entertainment.
Right. Well, theatre-wise, I was taken when I was small to see Peter Pan, which in those days was every year at the Scala Theatre, which is no longer there. I think it became the Channel 4 building, but it's not even that anymore. But children are very conservative creatures, really. So the following year, when I was asked what I wanted to see and was given a couple of possibilities, I immediately said Peter Pan. And that went on for about 5 years. And I think that did have a great effect on me, just the idea of theatre. Certainly by the time I was 8 or 9, I was watching a television program, not a children's program, it was a sort of variety program. And there was a man playing a ukulele and the ladies dancing in the background. And I said to myself, I want to do that. I don't know whether I wanted to be one of the ladies dancing in the background or whether I wanted to be the man playing the ukulele, but there was a feeling that I wanted to entertain in some sort of way. And that continued. Meanwhile, of course, children's television had started. We bought or rented a television for the coronation in 1953, when I would have been about 8 or 9. And in fact, I didn't watch the coronation there because I was taken up to Hyde Park Corner and placed on a balcony and felt sick. But I do remember seeing the Queen of Tonga getting soaking wet and all that. But the television became important. I remember my grandmother actually had one a little bit before, and I used to get very cross when it broke down. I used to hit it on the side, and I was a very placid child, but I was furious if Jennifer, who was the announcer, and she was young, I suppose she was only about 14, and she used to announce in the children's program. And if she didn't come on when she was meant to, I used to get very cross. And then this program, Whirligig, which had a huge effect on me, and I do look back on that with great pleasure. This was a magazine program, went out every other Saturday afternoon, live from, I understood later, Lime Grove Studios. And many years later, I was doing a Jackanory in that very studio. And I remember thinking that was very exciting. But Whirligig had Humphrey Lestock, who was an actor, introducing it with a sidekick who was a puppet called Mr. Turnip. And Mr. Turnip was a marionette, and I liked that. And they introduced various sections. And there was a magic section called Box of Tricks with a man called Geoffrey Robinson. I remember all these things so clearly. I was only 8 or 9, but it was very exciting. And that got me interested in magic and got me started in doing tricks. And I ended up doing magic at children's parties for many years. Then there was a man called Steve Race, who was a pianist, and he used to come on and play the piano and talk about playing the piano. And round about that time, I was learning to play the piano, and I was in the choir and everything, so music came into it. There was another puppet, a ventriloquist puppet with stories and so on. And I, when I look back, all the things which I've carried on doing for many, many years was sparked off by Whirligig. The children's theatre side of things, which I suppose, I was only 22 or something when I wrote my first children's play, and that was a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting to do that, but I was asked to by the rec company that I was acting in. It all sort of fell into place, and I suddenly realised that there was a reason. The magic had taught me how children's audiences react en masse. And I wanted the excitement, the buzz of a children's audience. I still find adult audiences very, very boring, really, because they'll clap at the end, even if they've hated every minute of it. Whereas children will let you know, they'll start talking to each other, or they'll kick the back of the seat, or say they want to go to the loo. So it's a huge challenge. And that's why I keep doing it, I think, that every performance is slightly different. Every audience is slightly different. And I do feel that they're the most important audience. And I feel that as far as television is concerned as well. And I think it is very worrying when we don't get enough regional and national programming, but are forced to have a diet of endless American cartoons or whatever. And I think that that is a very retrograde step.
Were there any other shows, like particularly favorable shows, you know, when you were younger or through your professional life that kind of stand out to you?
Well, certainly the Watch with Mother shows. I mean, the Flower Pot Men were great favorites. I quite enjoyed Andy Pandy, although I think maybe I was a year or two old for Andy Pandy and it was a little bit twee, and I sort of got the fact that it was a bit twee. But I liked the teddy bear in it, waving at the end, things like that. And the serials, again, one of the things I absolutely loved was the first time The Railway Children was broadcast. And I suppose that was a 6-part serial, and it would have been done live. And Jean Anderson played the mother. And years later, I was in a classic serial for BBC Two, and Jean Anderson was in it. And I sort of went down on one knee and said hello. And I said, I have to tell you, you know, you were really my second mother in those days. And she smiled nicely and she said, you're not the first one to say that. And it was quite obvious that that program had had a huge effect on us. There was also Billy Bunter. I loved Billy Bunter. Now, nowadays, it wouldn't be allowed to be on because you'd be saying, you know, it's about this overweight boy who everybody makes fun of and so on. But I'm afraid we didn't look at it that way. I mean, it was just great fun. There were other serials like Little Women. I think the first time Little Women went on, I saw that. And then as I got older, I became aware of programs like Blue Peter and certainly Jackanory. And it was a huge, I was really thrilled. I was about 24 when I was in If, which was Lindsay Anderson's film, which became an iconic film and is now looked upon, you know, as a cult film almost. And as a result of that, someone rang me up and said, would I be interested in doing a Jackanory? And that was fantastic because in those days, I mean, the people that did Jackanory, it was acting royalty and everybody queued up to do it, whether it be Judi Dench, obviously Bernard Cribbins, who was the most brilliant storyteller of the lot, but big names. And I was asked to do one. I ended up doing, I think, 3 or 4 Jackanories, which were hugely, I learned an awful lot. I remember the first time I did it, I did all the rehearsals wearing my glasses, and then obviously vanity took over. And so I decided that for the actual take, I wouldn't wear the glasses because the music started and everything, and I couldn't see the autocue. And so I said, I'm terribly sorry, we're going to have to stop. And I'm either going to have to put my glasses on or the camera is going to have to come nearer with the autocue on it. And they were all very accommodating. But later on, they did Jackanory 3000. This was several years later. And we did 10 episodes spread over 2 weeks of The Hobbit. And there were 4 of us telling the story. And that I look back as one of the greatest pleasures of my working life as an actor. There was Bernard Cribbins, Jan Francis, who was an actress that I loved watching and I was very keen to meet, and Maurice Denham, who was the radio actor of his generation and marvelous and did voices and so on, and me. And we were in, again, that, that Lime Grove studio, sitting on rather damp earth, I seem to remember, programs like that, and also Play Away, because I became a regular on Play Away, which was the entertainment version of Play School, if you like, the Saturday afternoon version. And I never did Play School. A lot of people assume that I must have done, but I didn't. I went in really, I think, because the producer had seen me in a review, an adult review, where I was singing and I was moving around. So, but I absolutely loved my Play Away weeks. And so the children's thing was going alongside everything else I was doing. There was a feeling too in those days that you could get tarred with the children's brush. We all used to rehearse at the BBC anyway. We used to rehearse in Acton, the North Acton rehearsal rooms, which were purpose-built rehearsal rooms, 3 rehearsal rooms, beautiful facilities on each floor, about 6 floors, and a canteen at the top. And you'd go up for your lunch, and there'd be Morecambe and Wise on that table. There'd be the Porridge people with Ronnie Barker on that table. The Troubleshooters would be on there. All these famous faces. Dad's Army would be over there. And not only that, you very often used to pick up your next job because directors would see you up there and being lazy and not going through spotlight looking for people. There was a lovely story. Gareth, he was in the Avengers, and this was before the Avengers, and he wasn't that well known, and I certainly wasn't. And we were both in a show called The Love School, which was about the pre-Raphaelites. And we were on the first floor, and the canteen was on the 7th floor, say. And I came down after lunch one day, and he came down a few minutes, and he came in white-faced. I said, "What's the matter?" So he said, "Well," he said, "it's most extraordinary." He said, "I got in the lift, and there was this man in there." He said, "And by the time we got down to this floor, I'd got 5 episodes of Doctor Who." And it was true. It was a bit like that. And you felt that working for the corporation, you felt that you were working for a big organization. And well, of course, you don't get that anymore.
Going back to sort of when I remember when we spoke in the pre-chat, you told me a really kind of interesting story of how you were interested in doing drama, and at the time that there was only 2 universities that did it in the country, and you didn't get in to do either of them, but ended up going to Oxford instead.
It sounds awful to say that, but ended up going to Oxford. It was true. I wanted to go to drama school. My headmaster at the grammar school where I was, he knew about my manic interest in theatre, which was something I didn't talk about that much to other people, because you didn't. I mean, it was very sort of, I don't know, you kept it quiet. But he knew, and he had a daughter who had been on a drama course, a residential one in the summer, and he told me about this. And so I ended up on that when I was 14. I was the youngest member, and it was, I still say it was the best week of my life, because there were all these other people there who were interested in what I was interested in. We were all, the whole thing of working towards a common goal, and we would be making props one moment, we'd be having movement sessions the next, we'd be singing something. It was quite wonderful. And I carried on going to those, and I did school plays and so on, but I wanted to go to drama school. And this headmaster said, "Oh no," he said, I think you should be getting a degree. You're perfectly able to get a degree." And so I entered for Bristol, and as you say, there were only 2 universities in the country where you could do drama, and you had to do it with another subject. So Bristol, it was French, say, and drama, and Manchester was the other one. And I failed to get in, and that was, I suppose, during the first year of doing A levels. And I remember thinking, I've wasted my life. I've wasted this whole time. I should have gone to drama school. And the headmaster said, "Well, let's try and get you into Oxford." And I didn't really take it very seriously. But I got in, and those 3 years were absolutely amazing. Now, they wouldn't exist now. I mean, I did virtually no work at all. I scraped through with a 3rd-class degree and was thrilled to do so, because in many ways I didn't deserve it. But I did more theatre there than I would have done at drama school. I did everything from Shakespeare, a tour in Europe too with Shakespeare, to review at the Edinburgh Festival, to playing Algernon in The Importance of Being Earnest. It was like a rep, really. I was doing 2 or 3 shows a term. You weren't really meant to do that, but I was. And then in for last year, you were meant not to do any at all. They said, "No, you must really work now for the last year." But as soon as the last year started, they announced that Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were coming to Oxford to act with Oud's in a production of Dr. Faustus. And Neville Coghill, who was directing it, who I'd known from another thing, wrote and said he wanted me to play Burton's servant. And so I wrote to my tutor and I said, "I can't not do this, can I?" And he wrote back using the same language. He said, "No, of course you can't not do this. All right, but do try and do a bit of work, because I think the degree might come in handy later on." Extraordinary. And we went to the West End twice as well with shows, student shows. So I wouldn't have missed that for the world. But it was not an overtly conventional way of getting into the business. But it was the acting that interested me then. I mean, the writing, I was writing songs, but the children's side of it was mainly my magic. And that helped me get into Oxford, because in my interview, there were several dons there, including the man that became my tutor, who was a brilliant, brilliant man called Christopher Ricks. And I was the last in because my name began with W, and they were all really tired. And one had a bottle of whiskey in his hand. And they started asking questions, and they said, "Oh, see here, you're interested in magic and conjuring or something." And I said yes, and I took it very seriously. And I said, yes, yes, I do shows and so on. So they said, oh, rabbits and hats and all that sort of stuff, ho, ho, ho. And I said, no, actually not. I said, I used to produce a rabbit, not a rabbit, no, a guinea pig. And I said, and I do sometimes produce a hamster, but not. And then I said, but of course, rabbits. No. I said, it's doves now. Doves are all the thing. And they said, right, really? So I said, yes, Channing Pollock is earning £1,000 a week at the Pigalle doing a dove act. And I think they were sort of taken away by this, because I was, I don't know, I suppose I was very serious about it. And later on, I asked my tutor at the end of the 3 years at the obligatory sherry party, I said, why me? Because, he said, no. He said, at Oxford here and at Cambridge, he said, we, of course, take the cream. And he said, you're obviously not one of those. He said, and then we leave a whole lot out for the other universities, and said, then there's a group of people that we think might be quite fun to have around. They're capable of getting a degree, but they're quite fun. And he said, it was your magic. He said, I had 3 small children and I thought it'd be useful. And I did. I used to do magic shows for his children and get paid as well. So all that was going on. And the children's thing has remained a very important part of everything I do.
Looking back, is there something that you think, had that not happened, you wouldn't be where you are today in your career?
I think that about many things. There are many moments where things happen, and it's a bit like the sliding doors, isn't it? Do you go one way or do you go the other? I mean, this is nothing to do with children, but I remember one day I had very little to do. I was very fortunate. I had a show on in the West End, which I directed, but I wasn't actually doing anything during the day. And I went to Harrods, just passing, and I looked in the food hall, not to buy anything, but the food hall was with fish displays and everything. And as I came out, a gypsy lady thrust a sprig of heather into my hand and said, "This will bring you luck." Now, it was the sort of situation that I think, if I'm honest, normally I would probably have brushed her aside. But for some reason I didn't, and I put in my pocket and I brought out sixpence or a shilling, whatever it was in those days. It was, I think, pre-decimal. And she said, thank you. And I thought no more of it, put this thing in my pocket and went home, which involved going on the tube down to North Cheam in Surrey on a bus at the end of it. And I got into the flat and the phone was ringing, and it was about 6 o'clock, maybe gone 6. I picked up the phone and it was my agent. And I thought, what on earth? He shouldn't be in the office now. And he said, David said, can you get to London Weekend Television now for an interview? And I said, but interviewing now? So he said, yes, they want to see you now. So I said, well, I suppose it would take me about, they were way up on the North Circuit. I said, I'll try. So I go up there and welcomed in and told that they are about to do a play, which is a two-hander, and they're interested maybe in me playing the part, and that it's opposite Shelley Winters, who was a major American film star who was coming over to do it. And I sort of expressed interest, and they offered me the job on the spot. I didn't have to read for it, had to do anything. And as they did it, I actually felt in my pocket and felt this sprig of heather. And I thought, well, surely not, this is not. But there are things like that that happen that are out of this world, really, that you think, well, why? Why did that happen? And also, I do think you have to make your own luck. I don't believe that you can just sit back and expect it all to fall in your lap. I've never felt that. I mean, when I was in rep, I went into rep at the Swan Theatre, Worcester, and I would have been 21, 22, I suppose. And it was a lovely job because I was acting, and then every other production I would direct. So great, experience. And then they gave me this job of doing the children's shows as well. But one of the things was I was always worried about where the next job might come from. And so I used to write 5 letters a day. And in those days, no computers and everything. So handwritten letters, and enclose a CV and a photo. And the CVs I did get run off on one of those Roneo machines that you could have. And the idea was, if I wrote 5 letters a day to everybody in Spotlight or Contacts magazine, I think was another thing. And it was to producers, theatre, television, film, casting directors, radio, anybody. But if I did 5 every day, that was 35 a week. And over a 3-month period or whatever, the theory was that if just one of those letters was not thrown in the waste paper basket, and if I got one job from this, it would have paid for itself and would have been worthwhile. And the film I mentioned just now, If, I got that from it because I wrote to Miriam Brickman, who was a casting director I'd never heard of. But she got this letter and asked me to go and audition. So I do believe that you've got to do it yourself. But on the other hand, there are people who help you along the way, and there are situations that come along and you must take advantage of them.
I think, yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, the modern form of that is sending an email, which I think I've done, a lot and got a fair amount from. But I've got kind of one final question for you now, David, and it's, we've looked back in the past now, but looking more to the future. Is there, in sort of one sentence, you would say that encompasses what you see for the future of children's TV and the future of children's theatre and just children's media? And I guess any advice for younger people coming into the industry, and if this is an industry they should come into?
Well, advice would be, don't come into it until you are sure that you want to come into it and are passionate about doing it. What we can't have in children's theatre, or I think television, is cynicism. And a lot of people will, on the acting side, say they will audition for a children's play, whereas deep down they feel that it's a bit beneath them, second or third division. And hopefully, if I'm directing and auditioning them, I will suss that out and I won't actually offer them a job. Because the fact is that the job itself, performing for children, writing for children, producing for children, is arguably the most difficult thing that people will ever do. I believe that it's more difficult than anything for adults. And it's something which is very, very rewarding when you do it. I'm not talking financially now, but I mean, you do get a tremendous buzz out of it. I mean, I still, after, I've been doing it for 55 years or something, but I still get a huge buzz from standing at the back of the auditorium, witnessing a full house of children reacting positively to one of my things. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. But there are a lot of people who, I'm afraid, still do not see our children's world as important, if you like, as the adult sector. And until we get over that hurdle, maybe it's something to do with money, maybe it's something to do with attitude, maybe it's something to do with the British attitude towards children. I think there is, a lot of people used to say that French children were always welcome to be at the meal and everything, and maybe English children were. I don't know. What I do know is that the attitude is a bit better now, in as much as theatres are far more willing to program children's shows. They realize that it's something they should do, but they also see it as, commercially acceptable too, and that they will do it, whereas they never did when I started. As far as television is concerned, I would just hope against hope that we were able to continue having enough original content specifically for children, made by people who care and who know what they're doing, and that can still happen. I think it would be a tragedy if it didn't.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you so much for joining us here at the Children's Media Conference.
Thank you very much. I hope the conference goes really well.